Hi, my name is John Green.
Traffic.
But I just want to
Sorry, say you.
so I was waiting to play with. I wish my children up to say the same shit. Dear Lord, I won't be in my prayers. Because we really, really need you down here. The pain that we go through. We know that you're real, so can you call through? Father, have mercy when we call on you. But I just want to call on you. So don't you ain't got to play with. I wish my children up to say the same shit.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Alright. Look, I keep it on to the team. Younger than the sweet. This a whole nother way, boy. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. Nigga, come through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. Come through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. Come through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat, boy. The shit is too weak. I'm on go, but they don't believe. You know I'm winning with the team. Screaming, Vinny, beach. And them devils screaming out, bloody murder. I'm about to close the curtain. Bitch, I'm working. Sorry, all them lines, it ain't working. The niggas weak, say church. I'm a West nigga, that's for certain. They cross the line, I'ma back up and I'ma hit his ass with his knife. And I come through with 300 strong, 144 lead a night. All my niggas weak. In this bitch with the ice. All y'all through the street. Tell y'all through the street. The nigga made the wrong move, he make his ass out the lead. Ain't one of us hit the lead. Ain't one of us here break. Come through all black, gully jack, man. All the niggas go retreat. Go ahead, I keep it on to the team. U.P.K play for keeps. Ain't sweet, got soldiers on deck. And my younger than the sweet. This a whole nother way. Tell them get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us. See a breach, nigga, come through all black, gully jack, man, all them niggas go retreat. Come through all black, gully jack, man, all them niggas go. You know this look that's on my face, bitch, I'm for real. Hit the street, put on my bitch, was in the field with it. You saw this cotton just after Uncle Phil with it. And then my targets on the hold on, I'm like, take is a visionary. Matter of fact, he weak. It's for time for people think you hard, nigga, you ain't. Look with us, nigga, you can't. You smart cars, we takes. We form up, feel right. We ride bad, this rap shit. All black, no right shit. Real life, no cap, bitch. Fall on, that's cap shit. I can't lower to the team. U.P.K play the keys. Ain't shit sweet, got soldiers on deck, and my youngest did a sweet. This a whole nother way. Tell them get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here French. Nigga, come through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. Come through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here French. Come through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat.
Hey, I'm just following orders.
You gotta see that CC first. Come on, man. They say they wanna hit it raw. These niggas claiming that they boss. These niggas been up with coach. If they get it wrong with coach. See me, they like, ooh, keep on chopping. I'm on my way up and they ain't gon' stop it. They say they wanna hit it raw. I'm on my way. I'm coming up on my nose. Keep on chopping. I'm on my body. Real niggas right beside me. Damn right, I'm from my hobby. Going up like a rocket. Can't nobody stop me. These niggas garbage. So watch your mouth, boy. Coming all black, slipping. house, call me mouth boy. I'm off the hip like a cowboy. I'm a king, you should bow boy. Shorty like that, man. Feel like I can handle 144 with a few boy rap. Niggas do you dirty like a stick in a band. Slide in the corner like a bum with a band. I'ma leave like this. Got this bitch on the hand, got this bitch, got this drip, about to hit this bitch with the soap. It ain't rap, it's a soap. Can't take a bitch, listen with the coke. They say they wanna hit it raw shit. These niggas claiming that they bullshit. These niggas better move it coach. If they make the wrong move it coach. Ain't no power in me, cause I'm cold as a bitch's shoulder who ain't calling the weak. Get that cooking on his feet, yeah, like it well done. Got the killers holding me, and they all red rum, red rum, red rum. Got you fucking scared, some get the baiting on his feet, till my fucking head look black, like red rum, black.
Yeah, Shalom Israel. We are the I.S.U.P.K. 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under commanding GEN.YAHANNA. We've been teaching the truth about the Bible since 1969, that blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians are the lost 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. All right, before we get into the class today, I'll just go over the class schedule. All right, on a Monday, right, we have the Monday night history class, right, with Priest and Officer Makar Kobal. On a Tuesday, we have the brother class with Priest and Officer Sowapiala. On a Wednesday, we have the law class with Priest and Officer Matt Kwayak. On a Thursday, we don't have any classes locally here in Trinidad, but from time to time, we do stream the classes out of Harlem, New York with 12 Shield General Mahaiman. On a Friday, we have the Lashawan Kwadash, which is the Hebrew class, which is done by Priest and Officer Yakad, right? Here in the I.S.U.P.K, we learn to read, write, and speak Hebrew, right? That's a good class if you want to learn the native language of the Black, Hispanic, and the Native Indian man, right? On a Saturday, we have the Sabbath service. The Sabbath service is done by Priest and Officer Sowapiala and Priest and Officer Yakad. From time to time, you may see other brothers conduct the Sabbath service as well, right? And on a Sunday, which is today, right, we have the scripture breakdown class. This class is usually done by Priest and Officer Galawan, who is the head of the Trinidad and Tobago camp locally here in Trinidad and Tobago, right? All these classes, right, start from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., right? With the exception of today's class and the Sabbath service. The Sabbath service runs from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., right? And this class runs from 12 p.m. till 2 p.m., all right? So this is the schedule for the classes locally here in Trinidad and Tobago, all right? I am Priest Officer Micah. I am standing for Priest Officer Galawan today, all right? So, and before I get into the class, right, I like to say to tune in, subscribe to all the I.S.U.P.K social media platforms such as the YouTube and the Facebook, the Twitter. You have Instagram, TikTok, right? All these social platforms of the I.S.U.P.K Trinidad and even I.S.U.P.K worldwide are active, interactive, right? Get in touch with these different social media platforms, learn your history, learn your culture, learn your identity, right? The Black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man, we are the true Jews of the Bible, right? And according to the Bible, Christ, the image that we know of Christ today, as we see that this white image is not true, right? According to the Bible, Christ is a black man who walked the face of the earth, right? If you're in Trinidad, right, and in the Spanish-speaking community, we like to say somos la escuela israelita de conocimiento práctico universal de 25 calle a la Nueva York bajo el mando de GEN.YAHANNA. Hemos sido enseñando la verdad sobre la Biblia desde 1969, que los negros, hispanos y indios nativos son las 12 tribus perdidas de la nación de Israel. Right? We say, ven a conocer tu cultura, ven a conocer tu historia van a conocer tu identidad. Alright? El líder es oficial Galawan de Trinidad Campamento. Alright? El número de teléfono es 290-5173. 290-5173. Alright? So with that out of the way, we're going to begin the class. Right? Today's class, right, is about slavery. The black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man should not forget about slavery. All right? All right? Too many times on all different social media videos, right, on the television, they're always telling them to move on, forget about slavery. Right? That was in the past. Right? Right? But the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man, that is an integral part of our culture. Right? It is something that happened to the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man that in very recent times, right? Most media try to portray it as something that happened a long time ago, right? When it was only about 2 generations ago, right? Many of our great grandparents came out of slavery, right? So it's not anything that is very distant in the past, right? And one of the main things about slavery is it is connected to the black man's history and who the black man really is, right? Slavery is directly connected in the Bible, right? In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, we will go into slavery, right? If we disobey the laws, the statutes, and commandments of the Most High, right? Which did happen to us, right? And we were placed under the bondage and oppression of the white man today, right? Because the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man did not, right? Or I should say, fell away from the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High, right? So the first scripture I'd like somebody to hold John chapter 8 and verse 32, and then we will jump back to Deuteronomy 28, Babakasha.
Right, come on, come. The book of John, chapter 8 and verse 32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
That's right. The scripture says we should know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Right? The black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man has a truth, right? That the world tries to hide, right? And the world became confederate to hide the history of the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man. No matter what library or even in the books in the classrooms, right? Every time slavery starts, somehow it's 19, right? When the black on the slave ship and nobody able to tell you what happened before, right? And even the events that happen on these ships and on the plantations, right, are inaccurate because they try to change it and make it more palatable or suitable, right, to suit their agenda and to suit their doctrine, so that the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man wouldn't realize, right, that these nations around us are our enemies, right? They are the ones who cause us to suffer even beyond what our punishment is supposed to be on the face of the earth, right? So from there we'll jump to Deuteronomy chapter 28, and you will start me from verse Deuteronomy 28 and 1, Babakosha. Right? Deuteronomy 28 and verse 1. The black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man, right, does not know that his history is tied directly to the scriptures, right? According to the Bible, the Jews are black, right? Christ was black, the angels black, right? All the famous kings in the Bible, King Solomon, right? A lot of people know about King Solomon, right? King Solomon was a black man who walked the face of the earth, right? All these prophets in the Bible are black, right? And they are Jews. And a lot of people do not know, right, that the black, the Native, and the Indian, the Native Indian man today, right, the Hispanic and the Native Indian man today are the true Jews of the Bible. We are the Israelites you read about in the scriptures, right? We are God's chosen people on the face of the earth, right? So give me Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 1, Babakasha.
Book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 1. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy power, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee high above all nations of the earth.
Right? So in the book of Deuteronomy 28:1, right? This was Moses, right? Addressing the nation of Israel, right? And God had commanded us that if we should follow diligently the things that he left us, the constitution he left for us to build a nation, right? That we would be set on high above all nations on the face of the earth, right? The Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man would be in rulership today, right? Because we were the chosen people on the face of the earth, right? Jump to verse Deuteronomy 28 and verse 15, Baba Kusha.
Verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God.
Right, so it say, if thou will not hearken to the voice of the Lord our God, if we did not listen, if we choose to do our own thing, right, if we choose to walk away, right, and not follow the laws, the statutes and commandments of the Most High, this will happen to us. Go ahead.
To observe and do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
Right, so it say if we do observe to do, right, the Christian church like one part, they like to observe, right, but the Christian church don't like to do, right? So it say to observe and to do, right, to observe and to do all his commandments, right, and his statutes, right? A lot of these movies, right, images, right, that the Black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man view on social media and on all these different media platforms, the television and things like that, right? The most time they're always talking about 10 commandments, right? Right, there's more than 10 commandments. There's a whole book of laws called the King James Version 1611 Bible, right? That is the history of the Black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man, right? There are more than 10 commandments, right? And it say if we don't observe to do the commandments and the statutes, the laws and the constitution that the Most High gave us, right? If we don't follow this, he say all these curses and punishments will come upon the Indian man in a syphilis, right? You're working 18, 19-hour jobs, right? Just to pay your bills, right? Things ain't coming as easy for you in life, right? Life become very difficult. You understand? Families breaking up, right? Abortion, right? Homosexuality taking the homes, you understand? As single parent homes. A lot of these things happening because the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man does not know. The Christian church and the religious leaders never told us that and explained to us that we're supposed to be following the laws, the statutes, and commandments of the Most High, right? And when it say in the book in the verse in Deuteronomy 28:15 to the end, it say the curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. When it says shall come upon thee and overtake thee, it means when it says curses, the curses is punishments are the Most High, right? So these punishments would come upon us and overtake us. You understand? When someone overtake you, it totally consumes you, right? And you would not be able to flee from it, right? Even though you leave Trinidad and you go to America, you go to Canada, right? A lot of people leave Trinidad and going to Canada and America and England, right? Looking for a better life, and when they catch themselves, it's the same hardship, the same hell that they were seeing in Trinidad is the same hardship, right? That they're facing out there, right? Some of them are ashamed to even return home, understand, because they don't want the family to know the condition that they're living out. Most High, our religious leaders failed us, right? The people who supposed to protect the nation of the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man failed us, you understand, and caused us to be in this position, right? But in the I.S.U.P.K under commanding GEN.YAHANNA, right, we are teaching the Black man what he's supposed to do, right? We are teaching the Black man that he should come back and follow the laws, the statutes, and commandments of the Most High. Come back to be an upright man in society, right? And be an upright man in the eyes of the Most High, right? And these laws, these statutes, and commandments will would affect you, not only spiritually, but even physically on the face of the earth. You will begin to be a better man. People will going to see a better you, a more honest and upright man, right? A man who is just, right? And of good standing in the sight of the Most High, right? So from there, Babu Kusha, give me Deuteronomy 28 and verse 68, Babu Kusha.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again.
Right? The Lord say he should bring thee into Egypt again. Egypt is a word synonymous with bondage, right? So you say the Most High shall bring thee into bondage again. Go ahead.
With ships.
So like, let me just catch up with you. Okay, go ahead.
8 and verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
That's right. The Most High say he will bring us into Egypt again with ships, right? This took place in the transatlantic slave trade, right? This was already prophesied that it was going to happen to the black, the Hispanic, and Native Indian man, and it actually came to pass. Right? Continue.
By the way whereof I spake unto thee,
go ahead.
Thou shalt see it no more again.
Right? And when I say thou shalt see it no more again, thou shall no more, we shall no more see our homeland. The true homeland of the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man was the nation of Israel, right? Not Africa, right? The Negro man in the Caribbean today, the black, the Hispanic, and the Negro man in the Caribbean today are Israelites. They are the true Jews of the Bible, right? They are not Africans, right? They have Native African and they have Jews. We are the true Jews of the Bible, and we came from the land of Israel. All right, continue.
And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies.
You shall be sold what?
Unto your enemies.
Right, and it said the people where we're going to be sold on would be our enemies. Right, and when you look at the transatlantic slave trade today, right, the black man, the Negro man was, and the Hispanic man and the Native Indian man was sold to the white man. So the man who bought us, the man who we were sold to, which is the white man, is our enemy. Go ahead.
For bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you.
Right, for bondmen and bondwomen. Bondmen and bondwomen means slave men and slave women. Right, and no man shall buy you. No man had the might, right, or had the power to deliver us. Right, they were extreme battles on slave ships, extreme rebellions. Right, but nobody could deliver the whole nation. Yes, there are many tribes who won major rebellion. Major revolts, right, and were able to fight off certain parts of the white supremacy during slavery, right? But they were never able to deliver the entire nation of the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man, right, from captivity, right? So the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man, right, was prophesied to go into slavery, right? And today, right, a lot of people like to say that the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man is so-called free to do what they want. But when you look around today, the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man is still under oppression, right? Even after this event of the transatlantic slave trade took place, right? The black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man is still in the bottom of society. We still high in HIV, high in cancer, high in high blood pressure, right? We still under all forms of oppression from the police, right? Some places the government, and you look at Haiti, the whole Haitian governmental system is now in a mess, right? Then recently they get hit with an earthquake, right? They go down in Brazil, the people under oppression, in Venezuela, the people under oppression, right? Colombia, Trinidad, Jamaica, all around, all where the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man seems to be settling is under extreme oppression, right? Under extreme turmoil, right? The black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man, right, is still under the oppression of white supremacy, right? Even the day that is a word that is used, right? Or although they try to shy away from it in all different all different sectors, right, of society, right, it's going to be one form of oppression, of white supremacy, right? And it may slightly differ from one to the other, but it's the same thing, right? From the little man on the street, even to those who have even accomplished and hold major jobs in society, they still face that sense of white supremacy in society, right? So I just bringing up an article here. This is an article. I will bring up. I'm gonna bring up this one first. Right now, this is an article that talk about the punishment in slavery, right? And we just run through it a little bit, right? And then we will bring it up to modern day today, because a lot of things happen today that a lot of people are kind of unaware of, right? Of the things that still takes place today, right? And it kind of fly under the radar because pandemic and a lot of things happening in the world today, and it fly under the radar because everybody is heavily concerned with the pandemic. The media is heavily concerned with the pandemic, right? So this is an article, right, called "Horrific Punishments of Slave in Colonial America," right? You want to read the first part and then we see the part? Or you want to read the first part? Yeah. So so you can begin from the top. Yeah. Yeah.
Horrific punishment of slaves in colonial America. Slavery refers to a condition in which individuals are owned by others who control the general conditions of their lives, including where they live, what they eat, their work, movements, etc.
Right. So this first part showing you that a slave basically had no right, right? Because the slave basically everything he master was controlling, everything the plantation owner would control, right? Where he live, eat, where he work, movements meaning where he would go, right? So he couldn't go any and anyway. All right. Continue.
Slave trade is one of the social phenomena in history that is associated with the cruelest and dehumanizing treatment. Since the enslaved people are nothing less than properties in the custody of their masters, they are treated in the most bizarre manners that have no human consideration attached.
All right, and this part here, when I say when I say that they were treated as properties, right? There's another article I was trying to get before I come here. This article, right, was in the in a book, one of our the first Prime Minister Chante Bego wrote, right? And when I say property, it's a part telling you that the slaves used to be put in the cargo hold, right? Because when we think about property, sometimes we just say like they gather people and put them in the passenger section in the boat and sail them over, right? They were not put in the passenger section; they were actually considered property. So wherever your cow, all the cattle and things going, right, or all the loose goods, the slaves was. You understand? They were actually cargo on the boat, right? They were not listed as passengers, right? And a lot of times, historians, when they go back, right, they would complain and finding difficulty at the slave records, right? And what they get to discover is that the slaves, the records were listed on the cargo list and not the passenger list. Right. You understand? So that to show you how the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man was treated very low, right, as nothing, right, in society, right? Continue, Bawakocha.
The punishment in South Louisiana.
Yeah, the first part. Yeah, this was the first part.
Right. Punishment in South Louisiana.
Go ahead.
The atrocities of these slaves took place both in the North and South and across the Americas. But without question, the degree of punishment differed in the South. Louisianian slave owner, Madame Lurie, was one of the most infamous slave owners in state.
Right. So this Madame Laurie, right? She was an infamous slave owner, well known. Right. Continue.
And ultimately the region. The conditions she subjected her enslaved were so heinous and despicable that even their own Salakia, that even other slave owners will applaud.
Right. And this is a a scripture talk about the I can't remember the exact scripture, but it talk about the wickedness of a woman, right? And this slave owner was so evil, even the other slave owners couldn't believe. You understand? What this lady used to do.
Right.
You understand? She shocking them too, and them shocked at how far she willing to go. You understand? And the punishment she putting down on she slaves. You understand? So it's like the meet somebody even more cruel than what I had in the mind, right? Continue.
Journalists at the time couldn't even bring themselves to describe the awful things she did. Instead, the New Orleans Bee wrote, we would shrink from the task of detailing the painful circumstances connected therewith. Were it not that a sense of duty renders it indispensable to do so. After Laurie's home caught fire one day, a crowd to fight the flames. Salakia. After Laurie's home caught fire one day, a crowd to fight the flames, but soon discovered something so gruesome they couldn't believe their eyes.
Right. So when she housed fire, right, and a crowd now run. Understand? To try to fight the flames to out down because I'm Madame Laurie house, right? The slave owner. So a crowd run now to try to out the fire, right? To see if they could fight the flames. Go ahead.
7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, were seen suspended by the neck, with their limbs apparently stretched and torn from one extremity to the other.
Right. So they pull all the limbs on the slaves until it busts out. You understand? When people run to fight the flames, they get to realize is that it's not like she hiding evidence. Then she just burned down the whole house. So they couldn't even bother to clean it up. They decided to burn down the whole plantation house, right? And that's how evil this woman was, right? So this is just different clippings that show you how evil and the punishment of slavery was, right? Go ahead.
Brutal whipping. The main method to control the behavior of slaves was the threat of whipping, which tore the flesh from their backs, arms, and legs. This method was preferred both in the north and south.
Right. So the north and the south, right, like this method in controlling slaves, right? To whipping them. Go ahead.
The whippings and beatings were usually so horrific and as bad as you could ever imagine. The number of lashes, which were always many, depended on the seriousness of the offense. Slaves were whipped daily.
Slaves were what?
Slaves were whipped daily.
Every day, right? People was getting licks, right? Go ahead.
It was not necessarily because they committed a serious offense. Rather, beatings, whippings, and other torture acts were a form of mind and bodily control.
Right? So you didn't even have to commit a crime. Understand? So them working on you psychologically, right? To try to break down your mind in order to control. There's somebody getting licks, you understand, and making psychologically afraid the master, right? Go ahead.
A way to reassert the dominance of their masters and also demoralize the slaves, keeping them bent on their labor.
That's right, because by seeing that every day, the break your spirit. And understand? So all he does getting up every day is to go and do the work wherever the master tell you. Right? Go ahead.
No condition makes an exception for any slave. The young, old, male, females, including pregnant women, and mentally and physically challenged.
And what? Mentally and what?
Mentally and physically challenged
Word.
will lash whenever the
Challenge or physical challenge, they're still beating you. You understand? So then making, you know, you go say, well, this man, when I hand and good, so we go leave you on the side. No, everybody was getting licks, right? Just pull up right there and give me Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse, I will tell it. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 4, not 48, give me 50, Babakasha. Right, and this is to show you how the Bible coincides with slavery. This is the black man's history, right? So over here, right, it says no condition makes an exception for any slaves. The young, the old, male and female, including pregnant women, mentally and physically challenged, will lash whenever the occasion called for such, right? Give me Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 50, Baba Kusha.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 50. A nation of fierce countenance.
Right, so this nation would come up against the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man, and this nation was the white man that we know today, right? Go ahead.
Which shall not regard the person of the old.
They shall not regard what?
Which shall not regard the person of the old.
Which means they wouldn't care about the person who are old, well,
nor show favor to the young.
And they wouldn't show favor to the young. So everybody was getting whipped and beat and had to do the same amount of labor, right? Even though you're mentally or physically challenged, them don't care. They mean you have to do the work, right? You can jump back over here, but okay, sure. Yeah. Right, I think it's come. Yeah.
In the case of pregnancy, a hole might be dug for the pregnant woman to rest their belly while being whipped.
Imagine that. You understand? So they're digging a hole because you ain't gonna roll away like a ball. They dig a hole for you to put your belly in. You understand? And then they're whipping your back. Go ahead.
Whipping grew so common during slavery.
Right, and they say the whippings was common during slavery. So that was a normal thing. So every day somebody getting licks, right? Go ahead.
Slave collars.
And if you see here, you can see the slave collar around the neck. All right?
Right.
Go ahead.
The South loved to use torture instruments, and they came in many shapes and forms. They were used to punish slaves by subjecting them to very uncomfortable and brutal conditions. Some of them were worn, whereas some were constructed, and the slaves confined to a particular killer fixed position by the instrument. When worn, the slave is forced to continue his or her daily task with the discomforting device and is also expected to work at the same pace and productivity level as when free.
Right, so when you put this collar on your neck, you have to produce the same amount of work as if you don't have the collar on your neck. All right, continue.
He or she may also be given a task to accomplish which they know will be very difficult to go about.
Which they know what?
Which they know will be very difficult to go about, which the torturous device interact.
You understand? So the sending between ones that are cutting tree or wherever, and they know you can't pass through it. You understand? So they're preventing a hurdle for you to try to complete your task. And you know if you ain't complete the task, what will happen to you? All right? Continue.
A black slave once told how he was tortured in his manner, with his neck snugly encased by an iron band, slave collar, an instrument of such a peculiar shape, so as to render his labor difficult to accomplish. The Negro stated, Salakia, that he wrote it for 2 good months.
Right, so he had that wrong in it for 2 months. Go ahead.
The form of the instrument prevented him from lying down.
What you can do?
The form of the instrument prevented him from lying down or sleeping.
Go ahead.
Naturally, fatigue would soon set in, causing delusion, rendering him burdensome for the day.
You understand? So definitely upright. You understand? I until you start to get delusional, you start to sleep. Right? Continue.
It consisted of a heavy iron ring fitting closely around the neck, from which extended 3 prongs each, 2 feet in length, with a ring on the end. Horrible.
Right? So we go hold up the phone, right? Right? But just showing you, right? Some of the punishment these slaves went through, right? And that is why we shouldn't forget about slavery. Understand? Because these devices was totally to destroy the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man. Right. Understand where I'm from? Right? It has studies that's showing that when the children are slaves, right? Some of these conditions pass down to them. Things like fear. You understand? The children and all become afraid, right? Even though there was not directly in or under the punishment after this time period. You understand? Everybody become subject, right? And become afraid of the white man. The white man become as a god. You understand? And many parts of the world, right? And it's only because information start to leak out now, things change. You understand? But I could remember back in primary school. You understand? When somebody in Trinidad would see a white person, that would be a big thing because we didn't know about traveling. You understand where I come from, right? We never used to see people like that predominantly in the society. You understand? We are accustomed to seeing Black and East Indian people and these kind of things. Right. It's only because the world now becomes so traveled, these things become normal, right? And we get to realize that these people who present themselves as God is a lie. You understand? Right? So all these things is the atrocities slaves go through, right? And I just like to I just want to share this video here, right? Now this is that video, this first video, right? This is a video run by WEON, right? WEON is an East Indian news network, right? And they run 2 stories, right, back to back, because the East Indians trying to seek reparations from England, right? Because as we know, England destroyed the East Indian Empire, causing them now to come to places like Trinidad and Jamaica, right, in 1845 to look for work, for contract work, right? And these how they find themselves in these parts of these places, because that was like Britain. That was like Britain. We are getting back employment for them because Britain destroyed the entire textile industry, right, causing them now to become in poverty. So Britain now had to look for work for the people, right? Thus, they send them on as indentured laborers to the Caribbean and all these Caribbean islands, right? So this is the article run. This is a news story run by WEON, right? And in this news story, the headline on the news story saying Jamaica demands reparation from the Queen, right? So you go run it.
It comes around, sometimes in the form of a frisbee, sometimes as a haunting nightmare, and sometimes in the form. What goes around comes around, sometimes in the form of a frisbee, sometimes as a haunting nightmare, and sometimes in the form of a long, long bill. The Queen of Britain will soon receive one. It will be from Jamaica. The Caribbean country is asking the British Queen to cough up billions. What for? As reparations for slavery. Quick background. Jamaica was a British colony from 1655 to 1962.
All right. So this first part here, right, is saying that Jamaica now want to ask, demanding that the Queen gave them reparation for slavery, right? Right. And one of the things to note, right, this is East Indian News Network, right? And they practically know a lot more about slavery than even people who live in the Caribbean. Right? That's the place in the book of Psalms 83, right? Against the black man, right? They know more about history than many of we people do, right? So this is the East Indian News Network now covering this story where Jamaica demand reparations from the Queen, right? And just to give a date, this story, the news network, we run this story on the 7th of July 2021, right? So that deep in the heart of Corona, right? Recently, right?
Bill. The Queen of Britain will soon receive one. It will be from Jamaica. The Caribbean country is asking the British Queen to cough up billions. What for? As reparations for slavery. Quick background. Jamaica was a British colony from 1655 to 1962. The colonizer introduced sugarcane cultivation in Jamaica, and to support it, Britain introduced slaves. People were stolen from their homes and forced to work in the field.
Right. So the covering, so the know that the slaves were stolen from the homes, right, and forced to work in the fields, right, and the Native Indian man, and nobody offered to even stand up on behalf of the black man and say, look what happened. That's right. All right.
Many were shipped across to other countries as part of the transatlantic slave trade. In 1662, there were 400 slaves in Jamaica. By 1734, the number became 86,000. Between 1702 and 1749, nearly 300,000 slaves were imported to Jamaica.
Right, and this number is Jamaica alone. Right, that I just how much slaves alone came to 300,000. Right.
More than 100,000 were exported.
Right, and 100,000 get exported. Right, so if you could jump, give me Deuteronomy chapter 28. I will tell you what verse. Yeah, come. Right, give me Deuteronomy. Give me 64, Baba Kusha. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 64. Yeah.
Come. The book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 64.
Mm-hmm.
And the Most High shall scatter thee among all people.
Right, so you say the Most High will scatter we among all people. Go ahead.
From the one end of the earth,
Mm-hmm.
even unto the other.
Even unto the other. Right, they can hold up there. Right, and this just let me just play back this part. Right.
1949, nearly 300,000 slaves were imported to Jamaica. More than 100,000 were exported.
Right, and 100,000 was exported. So it's showing you. We not only bring wheat to Jamaica, but they even export wheat to other places.
Right.
You understand? So although the ship come and dock in Jamaica, they still take some of the slaves from there and export them in other countries. You understand? So it's showing you that we really get scattered over all different nations all through the Caribbean. Right? Even the Native Indians was shipped back to Europe. Right? Some of them served their slavery in Europe. You understand? Right? So the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man was scattered among all nations on the face of it, right? Well,
it was only in the
well, Slovakia.
And there thou shalt serve other gods.
Right? And there we go serve other gods, well,
which neither thou nor thy fathers have known.
Right? Which neither we or we forefathers, we forefathers never know about Egyptology, right? And being Muslim, right? And our church of the Latter-day Saints and Scientology and all these different things. We forefathers never know that. We never know them gods, right? Go ahead.
Even wood and stone.
Right? And they never know about Islam and Christianity. That's what the wood and the stone represent. You understand? We forefathers never know about that. We never know about that. We never came in slavery, right, with these kind of things, right? These are the things we pick up, right, by mixing with the other nations, right?
1807 that the British Parliament abolished slave trade, and it abolished slavery in 1837. By then, Britain had abducted and enslaved at least 12.5 million people. 12.5 million people enslaved. Many of them were Jamaicans.
Right? And remember, when I say Britain had enslaved 12.5 million people, we ain't talking about the Portuguese,
Right.
we're not talking about the Spanish, we're not talking about the French, and we're not talking about the Dutch. Right? This is Britain alone. So Britain alone enslaved 12.5 million people. Right? And if we should just go to a wild number and put everybody around that same number, is millions of slaves. And understand that was ripped away, right? Millions of black Jews, right, who we know as the Israelites today, ripped away, right, and sold into slavery, right? So that was a massive thing, right?
In 1833, Britain paid off 46,000 British slave owners.
Right, so Britain now, when they end slavery, they decide to pay off the slave owners. I tell you how good the slave owners had it. You understand? So after your work, right, you run a plantation, remember you're making profit from the plantation and you're sending tax to England. Right? When the slavery comes to an end, England decide to compensate the slave owners because they wouldn't have slaves again.
Right.
You understand? And they decide to pay them compensation, right, for losing the slave labor because they ended slavery. Right? Look at this.
They were given 20 million pounds.
Right? Each slave owner was given 20 million pounds.
Right.
But you have 20 million pounds, right? Back then. Even if it's the share, right? That's a massive amount of money. Right?
Almost 40% of that time's annual budget.
Right? And that 40% are the annual budget that they had back in that time. Understand? So England decided to take 40% of the budget. It come like Trinidad, right? Because the Trinidad budget is average around $40 to $50 billion, right? So especially the government taking 40% of Trinidad budget and give black people. Understand? What a difference that will make. You understand? Right? All them roads in Trinidad will not turn smooth. You understand? Right? None of them black people, all them shot and that have all them beat up.
To compensate for the quote-unquote properties themselves. What did the government give them? Forget compensation. Britain
not even an apology. And the black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man get nothing. So even if they get no money, nobody never come and make a statement and say, well, what we do was wrong.
Right.
Understand?
The country has been asking for justice for some time now. In 2015, then British Prime Minister David Cameron visited Jamaica. Jamaican leaders asked the government to pay reparations.
Right, so this is in 2015. Right, this was the Prime Minister at the time, which was David Cameron, and he visited Jamaica. Right, when they're going through all this back and forth, right? And they asked him about reparations for slavery, and this we say.
Cameron was told to even offer an apology. He'll move on.
Right, so the Prime Minister of Britain say, well, should just move on. Forget that.
Right.
And that is where that come from in the media today. Everybody tell you what, but forget about slavery. That was a long time. You understand where I come from? Because why? That's a British mindset. They're telling the slaves move on, right? And this at that time, the Jamaican Prime Minister, which was Portia Simpson Miller, right? She was the Jamaican Prime Minister at that time, right? And what's the kind of greeting that she given the British Prime Minister, who tell them to move on from slavery?
Reports published around that time revealed why he may have been reparation. Turns out one of Cameron's
hugging and kissing the slave master, who just tell him move on from that.
Own family members was among many slave owners,
right?
To have received compensation for loss of slaves.
Listen to this.
Jamaica did not. Family members was a reports published around that time revealed why he may have been so anti-reparation.
Right, so they're going and dig up in David Cameron past, right, to see why he's so anxious to say, well, move on, right?
Turns out one of Cameron's own family members was among many slave owners.
Right, so he come from a line, right, of slave owners. David Cameron. So he benefit directly from slavery because all that money passing down hand to hand to hand, right? Over generation.
The Culture Minister recently said, and I'm quoting, "We are especially pleased to announce that we have made further steps in our strides towards seeking reparatory justice for the victims and descendants of the transatlantic slave trade."
Right, and this is the Jamaica Culture Minister, and I'm trying to fight. Right?
Petition is being presented to
the
the
British
Queen
Empire
of
for
the UK
reparations.
and all
Right?
the government
This is a case that's still going on.
Now,
right?
we don't know how much Jamaica is asking for exactly, but here's what we can tell you. Britain has a history of denying reparations. In 2014, a coalition of 15 Caribbean countries presented a compensation plan to the UK. They wanted reparations for slave trade. A YouGov survey at that time found that 46% of the respondents in the UK opposed reparations. What about the government? The Foreign and Commonwealth Office said reparations are quote unquote not the answer.
So all these countries come together to ask for reparations, and the British government tell them reparations is not the answer. And that's how the white man does think. And that's that to show how he mind is. And that's come from. He had no remorse. And and no wonder the Most High had to send back Christ to totally rid this man of the face of the earth. And right? And this is the thing the generals and the captains and man had no place of repentance because they do care. And they reach the point where they're not turning back from where they're headed.
Legacy of slave trade. May I then ask, what's the answer for the legacy of slave trade? After the Second World War, Germany was made to compensate for the damages. In the years since, several companies have had to cough up money for oil spills, for nuclear power plant leaks, for gas leaks, for accidents. And here we are talking about millions of people being abducted and enslaved, but Britain refused for its inhumanity. And FYI, reparations for transatlantic slave trade could add up to $14 trillion.
Right, and that is a rough estimate. So they say if they is to come up with a number, right, to offer reparations for people slavery, right, it's $4. Imagine that. You understand? What's that kind of money? You understand? And that is a rough estimate that they'll come up with.
Like it refuses to return stolen goods, be it India's Kohinoor or Ethiopia's manuscripts. Treasures from British colonies decorate the crown and its properties today.
Right, so that's all the different things that are stealing from different countries over the years and decorate that crown, right? As trophy.
And palaces, and the UK sees nothing wrong with any of this. It feels no shame or the moral obligation to at least be apologetic, to at least apologize.
All the paintings, everything hanging up in the museum.
Today, Jamaica is setting a trend. It is asking for compensation for historical wrongs. Compensation it is entitled to. Compensation that 54 Commonwealth nations are also entitled to.
Right? And the say this compensation, right, supposed to be for 54 Commonwealth countries, right? And Trinidad is one of these Commonwealth countries under the British Empire, right? But one thing people don't know about the Commonwealth countries is not only Caribbean nations, it's African nations. India is one of them, and a couple other nations, right? Not only Caribbean nations. But one thing a lot of people don't know about the Commonwealth is that all the members in the Commonwealth, right, it was past slave colonies to Britain, right? So all the victims, right, of Britain bring them in this organization, and you're still underneath the Queen today. Right. And you was so that is like a rapist. Get back all the victims and form a group with them. Right. You understand? And giving you counsel. That is where it is. You understand? And that is where the Commonwealth is today, holding Commonwealth games. You understand? Right? We see all them athletes running out the lungs, and they don't know that this place, right, had you in slavery. Right. You understand? That is what happened today. When
and that's so true, because when you check out countries like Zimbabwe and things, you check out independence. They get independence of England.
That's
even
right.
They know say India or
that's right.
Get independence of England and all too.
That's right. You understand where I'm from? So all the victims, you're still under that victim syndrome. You understand? You're still following the queen even to today. You understand?
The Great Britain ruled them all, looted them all. You see, the British Empire was the largest the world has ever seen. It ruled over parts of Africa, Asia, America, Australia, and New Zealand. It squeezed all of them. From Africa, it abducted, trafficked, and enslaved people. Stole Benin bronzes. From Greece, it stole Elgin marbles. From Ethiopia, manuscripts. And from India, it drained $45 trillion.
Right. So remember, I remember earlier saying that this is our East Indian network we on, right? So the bottom of the map, right? This is why they run this article, right? This news story, right? So the news story was about Jamaica asking for reparations, right? And they run this article, but in the bottom of the map, what Britain's told for them is they drain the economy of 45 trillion. So that is what India asking for, right? So every nation had a different thing, right? But to the top end mark, Africa, right? It stole men and Benin bronze from parts of Africa, right? Now the men that are stole from Africa was not Africans. There was black Jews, right? Right? Israelites or the Negro men in the Caribbean, the Negro men, Hispanic men and women in the Caribbean today, right? So when you go, Benin is actually a country in Africa, right? A place in Africa, right? So when you go to Benin, right, because they say that the accusing Africa accusing England has stolen men and Benin, right? So this is it here. This is an article, right? This article was written on the 29th of January 2018, right? And this is where it say Odia, Benin, less than a mile from what was once West Africa's biggest slave port, the departure point for more than 1 million people in chains, stands a statue of Francisco Felix de Souza, right? And now we know how people had this name de Souza, right? And this statue is in Africa, right? So you'll come to know how people get a name, right? So in this part in Africa, in Benin, stands a statue Francisco Felix de Souza, a man regarded as the father of the city. So this man, Felix de Souza, is the father of this African city, right? That will mark on the statue, right? There is a museum devoted to his family and a plaza in his name. Every few decades, his descendants proudly bestow his nickname Chacha on a de Souza. But there's one part of de Souza's legacy that is seldom addressed, right? Late 1700s from Brazil, then a Portuguese colony, right? So Brazil was a Portuguese colony. That's why Brazil talking Portuguese today, right? So he come from this Portuguese colony, right? And come to Africa. He became one of the biggest slaves. So he was coming from the slave colony in Brazil to Africa to buy slaves, right? And they say he was one of the biggest slave merchants, meaning he buying the most, right? In Benin, where the government plans to build 2 museums devoted to the slave trade in collaboration with the Smithsonian Institution, slavery is an embattled subject. It is raised in political debates, downplayed by descendants of slave traders, and deplored by the descendants of slaves, right? So, the people who are the descendants of slave traders, that is why they have this battle of getting the correct story about slavery, because descendants of slaves still basing in all these slave port areas. You understand? So they're still controlling the narrative and the history. You understand? Right? So nobody can clearly come out and say, well, this is what happened. You understand? Because the descendants controlling the information that's coming out. Right? At a time when Americans again debating how slavery and civil war are memorialized. Benin and other West African nations are struggling to resolve their own legacies of complicity in the trade. Benin's conflict over slavery is particularly intense, right? So Benin in a conflict, right? And this is the conflict there. For over 200 years, powerful kings in what is now the country of Benin, right? So captured and sold slaves to the Portuguese. So the native Africans in the city of Benin captured and sold Israelite slaves to the Portuguese.
Right.
Understand? That is why the scripture, I can't remember exactly what the scripture is. The scripture talking about where they have sold a girl for a harlot and a boy for wine, right? Exactly. That is what happened. You understand? Native Africans wasn't selling other Africans. They were selling Israelites, right? And this even recorded in the Babylon to Timbuktu, right? They were selling Israelite people to slave colonies, right? And they're selling to the white man. The Portuguese is white people. The Spanish is white people. The British is white people. The Dutch is white people, right? The French is white people. So they were selling everybody, all these slaves to the white man. The white man was buying slaves because they were in the Americas trying to start all these different plantations, cocoa, coffee, cane, right? Tobacco, all these, that was big business. And the native Africans was selling Israelites, right? And this, right, is why the country in conflict. This is why they can't put out the real story, because their ancestors, right, who is the Africans, realize that, hey, we forefathers is who was selling slaves. You understand? So them just like the white man, right? And there's the people to understand when we say, right, the people in the Caribbean is not Africans. Right. Africans was selling the true Jews of the Bible. You understand? Right? The Negro man, the Hispanic man, and the native Indian man today, right? All these Negro people in the Caribbean today, we are the true Jews of the Bible. We are not native Africans. Native Africans were selling us into the Portuguese and to the French and to the Spanish and all these different colonies, right? So here what the article say. For over 200 years, powerful kings in what is now the country of Benin captured and sold slaves to Portuguese, French, and British merchants, right? To 3 different set of white people that they sell to, right? The slaves were usually men, women, and children from rival tribes. You know why they call it rival tribes? Because they was not of the same nation. Right. There was a different people. They didn't sell their own people. They sell people of a different nation. Gagged and jammed into boats bound for Brazil, Haiti, and the United States. You understand where I'm from? And all these 3 people had colonies. Haiti today, what are Haiti going to? Port-au-Prince. That is French. Right? And here the 3 people that say that they sell to Portuguese, French, and British. You understand where I'm from? Right? And that is why these countries today speak the same language as the oppressor. Right. Brazil was a Portuguese colony. They're still talking Portuguese today. Right? Trinidad, right? Well, we switch multiple hands until we end up in the British colony. That's why we speak in English today. Haiti was a French colony. They're still talking French today. Right? Creole is a broken form of French. Right? Santo Domingo, which is on the same island, right? They were conquered by the Spaniards. They're still talking Spanish today, right? And the slaves in America was British slave owners, right? Because America come out of Britain, right? And they still talking English today, like the predominant language. So it's showing you how the mark of the oppressor still remain on all the different slave colonies in the Caribbean. Right. You understand? Right down the chain. You understand? Saint Lucia. The reason why they call it the volcano La Soufrière, they're French, right? They at that time was a French colony. You understand? Right? So all these marks still stay on these places. Jamaica, British. You understand? Right? Until Jamaicans talk patois, which is a broken form of the language. You understand where I'm from? Right? So all these different marks remain on the slaves today. That's why we're able to identify who they is today. Understand? Right? Venezuela, Spaniards, right? Straight down to Colombia, Chile, Panama. All them is Spanish conquest coming right now. understand? Right? So the black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man was sold into slavery. And in this account here, right, showing it clearly that the Africans sell us, sell the true Jews of the Bible, the black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man into slavery, and the sellers to the white man, to the Portuguese, the French, and the British. In this case, right. Understand? And that is why the battling over the right how to release the story about slavery properly, because they don't want to reflect on the Native Africans that they were the ones also selling slaves to the white man. Understand? And that is the true story of slavery, just as the Bible put it over. You understand? And that's what the black man don't understand, that history, slave history, literally tied to the Bible, right? And we will run this news story, and then we will close off, right? This is a story here from the same same way on, because you're getting a how the East Indian mind thinking, because they already know what black people go through, the atrocities we go through, but everybody hushing them out. Right. Nobody standing up and say, well, nah, I feel that these people should, right? But the reason why we run the article with Jamaica on an East Indian network, predominantly an East Indian network, because them wanted to run their own article, because them two asking for reparations at the same time, right? And this is what happened to them, and because of this is how East Indians came into Trinidad in 1845, because the British totally drained the Indian economy, right?
A lot has been written and said about the British rule in India. If you read their version of history, you would think that the British Raj was the best thing that could have ever happened to India. But the fact is that the British looted India. A greedy and racist British Raj financed its industrial revolution by robbing India, and now there is more data to prove it. A study by Indian scholars reveals stunning numbers. The British looted as much as $45 trillion. Let that number sink in. $45 trillion between 1765 and 1938. Just so that you get a sense of how big this sum is, let me give you another figure. The amount of money that the British looted from India, $45 trillion, is 17 times the current GDP of the UK, 17. That's how much India, which used to be one of the richest countries in the world, was reduced to one of the poorest. But defenders of the British Raj would argue otherwise. They claim to have given India democracy, a free press, and the rule of law. They claim to have built the Indian railways, taught Indians how to speak English, and even play cricket.
Right. So the British, right? The British say the Indians would have been nothing, right? And the bosun, the British say that the teacher want to play cricket. Now, remember, cricket is a game that spread all over the Caribbean, right, even into the slave colonies. And I like to show you how the white man does think, right? So we trying to show them is this I civilize all it. You understand where I'm from? Right? And that is how they just think. If they're thinking so to these other nations, imagine how they're going to think to the black man. You understand where I'm from? They will watch as nothing. You understand where I'm from? So they're trying to tell them, boy, we teach all how to play cricket, right? Because that was a predominantly white man sport. You understand? Until black people totally overtake it and they realize we champion in the cause. You understand where I'm from? But before, right? I don't know if plenty we might remember, right? How cricket was long ago. When they're playing cricket, right? Remember everybody to be quiet, right, and when they bat the ball and they hit a boundary, everybody go get up and just get a little, and it's like how golf was. Right. Everybody would just clap. Right. This kind of until it came when black people started overtaking, like Brian Laran, right, and Gary Sobers and all of them. It become a big thing now, because that when men started being shed in the stadium, blowing horn, beating drum. Right. The whole thing changed, you understand? But that was like a sport like how golf was. You understand? Everybody, the stadium used to be dead silent. Right. You understand? Until somebody hit a 4, and if it a 6, and everybody will get up and they even clapping hard. They're clapping like this kind of, you understand? This kind of feminine kind of clap. You understand? That's how cricket was a long time. You understand? So that is why the British telling them, Understand? It's come like we civilize all there, right? But the point I want to go to is this last part here, right?
In Indian politics, Narendra Modi heaping praise on Shashi Tharoor.
Right. So this is the Indian Prime Minister, right? And the Indian Prime Minister heaping praise on the British Parliament to debate if India should get reparations from England, right?
For his debating skills. Modi was commending the opposition lawmaker for his passionate argument in the Oxford Union debate on whether Britain owes India reparations for 200 years of its colonial rule. The essence of Tharoor's submission was about the toll that British rule took on India's economy.
India's share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Why? Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain. In Britain's rise for 200 years was financed by its depredations in India.
Right? So it's showing how the white man sucked all these other countries and sucked them so much that it bring all the other nations into subjection. You understand? Until all of them follow with the white man tells them. Right?
In fact, Britain's industrial revolution was actually premised upon the deindustrialization of India.
Modi said Tharoor's speech gelled with the feelings of patriotic Indians on the issue and also shows what impression one can leave with effective arguments by saying the right things at the right place.
As far as I'm concerned, the ability to acknowledge a wrong that has been done, to simply say sorry, will go a far, far, far longer way than some percentage of GDP in the form of aid. What is required, it seems to me, is accepting the principle that reparations are owed. Personally, I'd be quite happy if it was £1 a year for the next 200 years after the last 200 years of Britain and India.
Right. So basically, we're saying, right? Them would be happy just if England would have just said sorry. You understand where I'm coming from? Right? If they couldn't get back the money, then I'd just be happy. But if England they just come and say sorry, right? But the black, the Hispanic, and the native Indian man, right? For us, it's gone far beyond that, right? And in the I.S.U.P.K under command in GEN.YAHANNA, that's why we just tell the black, Hispanic, and native Indian man to come back to the laws, the statutes, and the Mosai. Understand? We no longer looking for reparations. Understand? Because all with the spend, use, and misuse was already our own. You can't give them back what already own. You understand where I come from? Right? The black, Hispanic, and native Indian man had to come back in rulership. We had to come back in right standing with the Mosai. Understand? We are the kings and the priests on the face of the earth. You understand where I come from? Them can look for sorry. But for the black, Hispanic, and native Indian man, right? And them can look for a percentage in GDP. You understand? Right? Imagine them don't even care if they get back $1 a year for 200 years. You understand where I come from? Right? And that show you how evil the white man is. They don't care. They rape, plunder, and misuse all the nations on the face of the earth and bring them down to nothing. Right? So when a white man go say, I don't have no slaves. They always like to say that I don't have no slaves, right? But what you living now is because what your forefathers rape, plunder, and destroy countries all over the world. And as I come from, including the chosen people of the Most High, for you to live that way now. So all the big buildings you're seeing there now, right? And the building mark, you know, there's some building mark since 1845 and since 1776. Right. The reason why it marked since 1776 is because why we was the that cane money, right? Slave cane money and slave cotton money, right? And slave tobacco money who build all these cities, all the bridges, right? All the infrastructure, who make the country great. Understand? It's because they stole and enslaved people all over the face of the earth, right? And modern day America doing the same thing today. That why they run to make sure that Iraq under control. Understand? Run and make sure that they have places in Saudi Arabia, in the Caribbean, That's why they just try to have under control Venezuela. You see what they do with Maduro. Understand? That's why they put him in subjection. Right? Or trying to put him in subjection. Because why? That is their benefit. You understand? They benefit by stealing the resources and the wealth of others, stealing the culture of the people. You understand? And branding and leaving their culture and their traditions in society. There were a lot of places celebrating Christmas and Easter, and we want to know how these holidays come about. All these things is things that are handed down from the slave master. We pick up the culture of the other nations, right? And I will just run this here and we're closing off, right? This was a little story. This is just 2 minutes, right? That a 2-minute snippet. Right? They're talking about the Middle Passage, right? Which is a root in history, right? In not a root in history, a root in slavery, Slovakia.
The thing that distinguishes slavery in Africa,
right? So she's talking about what distinguishes, but because a lot of people don't understand or not in the UPK, that was tell people come into the I.S.U.P.K and they go learn the history and the culture, right? And the identity, right? And they go be learn to decipher the little snippets that will be falling out, right?
from Atlantic,
right?
slavery,
The thing that distinguished slavery that was happening already in Africa and slavery in the Atlantic, which is the Atlantic slave trade, the difference is race, right? So she's trying to say, right, it was a race of people, you understand, that descend to this part of the world. It was not like ordinary slavery. You're poor and you're living in some corner somewhere, they just bundle you up, right? And the advantage you. This slavery was the started brought a specific race of people, right?
The thing that distinguishes slavery in Africa from Atlantic slavery is race. Europeans set in motion a system of slavery that was predicated on the idea that certain people were marked as enslavable.
Right? So they mark this set of people as enslavable people. Understand? So they just don't go random. Understand? They look for this specific set of people. That's why in the Babylon to Timbuktu, the product we want. You couldn't go and catch Arabs and bring them as slaves. It had to be black Jewish slaves, right? On the slave market. It had to be the Israelites, right?
We've learned a great deal about the Middle Passage in the last 40 years or so. The volume of the trade involved the removal of about 12.5 million people from the African continent. The Middle Passage was the middle leg of a voyage that starts in Europe. The first passage is from Europe to Africa. The Middle Passage is the journey.
So the first passage is from Europe to Africa.
From Africa to America, and then
they bring in the Americas, right? So you see they come down, then they go across.
Passage is the journey back from America.
And the last passage is going back. And this is how the route was. You understand? So that's why some of the native Indian people end up back in Europe in slavery. You understand? It was a 3-way route. You understand? So they again sent across the Atlantic, sent back to Europe, and brought down from Europe to Africa. You understand? Right? Just like in the Babylon to Timbuktu and the scriptures, we fled from Israel, right? Which is in the north, and come down to Africa and get shipped across in the Atlantic slave trade. And since we get shipped, we get stolen, kidnapped across into the Americas in slavery.
To Europe.
The Middle Passage could take anywhere from 2 to 3 months.
Right? And I said the journey could take anywhere from 2 to 3 months. You understand? On a ship. So 2 to 3 months, you just shackle on a ship, right? And Lord be with you. And as I pray, you get food or water to drink.
Were separated. Men typically were held in the lower belly of the ship. The roof, if you would, was quite low, probably about 4 feet high. So people couldn't stand. African men were shackled together, and and they were packed so closely together in a spoon-like position. And they stayed.
To people, you're at 120 degrees. It smells terrible. There are actually people dying around you, which has to be a traumatic experience for everybody on board.
Maybe 10% of voyages, we know there was some attempt to rise up to kill the.
Right. This is a party where a lot of the history books will talk about. Right. And that's why this is some of these ships. They even call the slaves that the ships sink. But when they tell you that in a textbook, right? They're not explaining to you why the ships sink. Right? The ships sink because the slaves decide, but we ain't going, we only tell you to go. You understand? And whenever they escape all the shackles, they would overthrow the ship and try to turn back the ship. You understand? And in the process of that war, the ship sink. You understand? Because the ship received so much damage that it gone underwater. So these are even not only had rebellions on plantation, right? But even on the ships to show you that they just didn't take it and say, all right, well, we're slaves and all they go with me. You understand? It was actual war. You understand? There was literally fighting back. You understand? Trying to escape this demise that they end up in. You understand where I'm from? But this was a demise we couldn't fight. You understand? Because this was a demise of the Lord, that the Lord already prophesied that. You understand? Right? But don't make them tell you that the Negroes or the Hispanics or the Native Indians was cowards. And we just take whipping and get beat down to nothing and get beat to a pulp. You understand? We literally fight back, and a number of slave ships didn't make it to the Americas because the war on the ship was so dread, the ship sank. You understand? It went down in the bottom. So that them and they like to portray how the slaves commit suicide. Right? Yes, there are people who jump out. But they just didn't jump out for that reason. Some of them were actually drunk fighting. You know where I come from? And they fall out in the water and they drown. Right? So they just didn't give up their life just so.
Crew to try to turn the boat around to change their destiny. Historians have a hard time capturing what the Middle Passage must have felt like for enslaved men and women. It's a voyage that is deeply disorienting. It's a voyage to a place that you can't anticipate. You don't know what's going to happen to you. I don't think we have adequate words to capture that experience.
I know this ain't your home, but it's where you gotta be. It's time you're
right. And in the last part she just said is that the historians who trying to research this history can't even fathom, right, what it was like. First the torture, like we was reading before, was so brutal to the people. You understand where I come from? Right? They can't adequately explain because that was so inhumane that it had no other record that they could call on to say, well, it was like this. Right? And that is why the Atlantic slave trade was such a gruesome thing to happen to the Black and the Hispanic and the Native Indian man, right? And I will read the scripture and we will close off, right? Give me Deuteronomy chapter 28, and you'll give me verse. Give me verse 40.
Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 46. And they shall be upon thee for a sign.
Right, and this shall be upon thee for a sign. All the curses and the Native Indian man for a sign. Go ahead.
And for a wonder.
And for a wonder. Go ahead.
And upon thy seed forever.
And upon our seed forever. And understand the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man go constantly be scarred. Understand? Right? And remembered by the curses written in this book. Right? And one of these curses was slavery. And we still carry that mark today because why we still had the surnames of the oppressor. Understand? John. Understand? And the Cotto and the Souza. Understand? And Hernandez. Right? All the Spanish names, right? And French names and British names. This sign still upon me even till today. Understand? When we got around, we had the language Understand? We still talking the language of your oppressor today. Understand? Even in the year 2021. This is still upon us, right? For a sign and a wonder even unto today. Right? Right? So the black, the Hispanic, and the Native Indian man need to come back. And if you put on the Bible, take it back up. Right. Take a look at the I.S.U.P.K classes on the I.S.U.P.K on all the various I.S.U.P.K platforms. Understand? Listen, right? And try to understand what we say, right? Taking the classes, right? Look at the history. Understand? Right? Look at the culture of the people, right? Keep following on all the different social media platforms, right? And you will begin to learn more about your history, more about your culture, more about your identity, and more about who you are, right? As it is written in the Bible.
Security announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K out of 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under commanding General Yohanna. New brothers and sisters. When a new brother or sister come to the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are here to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves up. After 6 months, the brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to another brother or sister. There's another 6 months which the brother or sister will court each other. After the 6-month period, the brother or sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithe, which is a commandment. You can find this in Numbers chapter 18, verse 21, Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10. Means 10 in Hebrew function. Mishar, 10% of every penny and piece the Most High gives you, give to your treasury department or teacher peace fund. Period offering for priests, non-mandatory, whatever amount you like to give. Upcoming Holy Convocation, that will be the memorial blowing of trumpets, the first day of the 7th month. That will be Monday, the 6th September 2021. You can find it in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 24 and 25. Reminder after that watch them to check on social media such as I.S.U.P.K, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so on for I.S.U.P.K events and material. If your brother wants to be a trooper in the school, then you just start wearing all black, which includes black boots, light shirt, light pants, light headband, or scarf. That we say Majum, Sir, and rock with them. We're going to say the Lord's Prayer in Hebrew. Abanawa, Shabashemaya, Wadah, Ayah, Shamka, Yahweh, Waka, Zaka, Aisha, Barataza, Kawa, Ayah, Shemaya, Natan, Anoa, Lakam, Kal, Yawam, Wasalakno, Awakino, Wasalakno, Awakino, Ala'a, Abiano, Basel. Ball, China, Mayan, Rai, Aya, Laka, Malakwa, Wahala, Parat, Aman.
What we said in the English was, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Yahweh, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. So be it.
We're going to say the Hakat. Yahweh, Basham, Shai,
In the English, what we said was Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh, please give us the power for the heal, all manner of sickness, and all manner of disease, for to cleanse the leper, for to raise the dead, for against the clean spirit, cast them out. In the name of Yahweh, thank you. So be it.
We're going to say the blessings. Barak, Atah, Yahweh, Shai, Makala, Walhayam, Atazabia, Alwapiam, Asiraniam, Akwat Zayanyam, Akwat Yalyam, Watwatyam, Yahweh, Bashem, Oshai,
Aman. What we said in the English was, bless you, Yahweh, and Yahweh Shai, and Michael, and the angel, Commander GEN.YAHANNA, General, Captain, Officer, Troopers, and the sister, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai. Thank you. So be it. We're going to say the I.S.U.P.K curses. Blessed are you, Yahweh, King of heaven and earth, and all things living. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai. Listen to us now. Right now. Send evils and curses, and punishment and destruction. To the heathen that speak against us. The teacher,
Israelite brother,
and the school. Send evils and curses, and punishment and destruction. To the heathen, refuse to give to the school. Force their riches, enter into thy sanctuary. Send evils and curses, and punishment and destruction. To the Edomites, and the nation, and their drug dealers, the court system, the prison system, Planned Parenthood, all the government of our enemies, Amalek synagogue and army, Roman Catholic Church, Pope, Islam, Christianity, Egyptology, militia, Ku Klux Klan, Aryan Nation, Skinheads, gay movement, lesbian movement, spies, workers of witchcraft, NASA space program, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Wall Street, open up the internet, and the airwaves, the cable access channel, and the radio channel. Convict the spirit of any of thy people that seek to stop us and bring swift destruction to all the heathen that stand in the way for trying to stop us from broadcasting your word. Throw the plant through. Let loose all the plagues. Cause them to go to and fro through the earth and consume them. Let the plagues shake the house of the thief and the murderer. Let Yahweh Shai and Michael and Gabriel come down with the flying saucers and punish all the heathen that come up against us as we speak thy word. Cause it to be known by all that it is the angels that have done it. Cause it to be spread through the media, through the whole world. Cause them to shake at thy coming. In the name of Yahweh Shai. We thank you. So be it.
We're going to say, bless Israel. Yahweh, Bashem,
Yahushai, Magan.
Commanding General YAHANNA, General, Captain, Officer, Troopers, sisters, children, all the destroyed of Israel, Shariah, Indian family, Muslim family, Fletcher family.
Commanding General YAHANNA, Holy General, Holy Captain, Holy Officer, Holy Troopers, all the students, all the sisters, Shanka, Kaya, Yapa, Para.
Commanding GEN.YAHANNA, General, Captain, Officers, Troopers, students, sisters, all the destroyed of Israel, all those fighting to come to the truth, John family, Ikoto family, Alexis family, Philip family.
All the brothers and sisters in I.S.U.P.K.
All the brothers and sisters in I.S.U.P.K.
All the brothers and sisters fighting to come to the truth.
All the brothers and sisters fighting to come to the truth.
Children and babies in I.S.U.P.K.
Children and babies in I.S.U.P.K.
Sagala family. Pastor Wafan family. Zabaria family.
Tazuan family.
Francois
family. Ron family. Zion. Wesleyan. Daniela. Emilia. Ashia. Mayelin. Chantel. Nima. Khadija. Trisha.
Bashem.
Yahushai. Walaman. What we said in the English was Lord, in the name of Yahushua, bless us, and Israel, and the school, bless, heal, shield, protect our loved ones, in the name of Yahushua. Thank you. So be it.
So, let's get a teacher one crazy salute. Imagine. Barak.
Yahweh Shem El Shai Barakatah. Yadamata, Sa.
Let's get the sisters online. I want to do this with Imagine Shabbat, Imagine Barak, Yahushua, Tan Bashir, Shai, Yadamata, last 6 minutes.